COBOL program, we had two processes. One is compilation, one is execution. So compilation is what? To convert the source code into object code, and execution is what? To execute the object code. Now here, since in we have COBOL DB2 program here, along with COBOL code we have DB2 code also, like we have table SQL queries also. So simple compilation will not work. You cannot compile the DB2 statements, because inside a COBOL DB2 program we will have both normal COBOL statement and DB2 statement also, SQL queries. So using compilation, you cannot convert the entire thing into object code. Compilation will convert only the COBOL part, not the DB2 part. That is why in DB2 we have a thing called pre-compilation. In case of COBOL DB2 program, we have 3 JCLs: pre-compilation, bind, execution. So in normal COBOL programs, we had 2 JCLs. One is compilation JCL, one is execution JCL. But here in case of COBOL DB2 program, we'll have 3: pre-compilation, bind, execution. So what is pre-compilation? First, we will start with pre-compilation. So pre-compilation is, first of all, the what is the utility that is used? It will be asked in interview. Utility is DSN HPC. What is the COBOL compiling utility? COBOL program compiler utility, anyone?
IGY-CRCTL.
Yes. So IGY-CRCTL is used to compile COBOL program, and for pre-compilation we need DSN HPC. Okay, so you don't have to worry about this JCL. This will be already there in your project. Just you need to know which utility is used, because you may be asked in your interviews. So what will be done in pre-compilation? So pre-compilation, it basically separates the COBOL and DB2 statement. Since we cannot compile both the COBOL and DB2 statements together, so first of all we need to separate them. It basically separates the COBOL and DB2 statements. Okay, we have to separate the COBOL and DB2 statements. It will, in the pre-compilation JCL, after separating COBOL and DB2 code using IGY-CRCTL, COBOL part will be converted to object code. That means in pre-compilation there will be 2 steps. Just imagine there will be 2 steps. In the first step, the COBOL and DB2 statements will be separated. Okay, so using DSN HPC, COBOL and DB2 statements will be separated. COBOL statements, then there will be another step inside the pre-compilation JCL. After DSN HPC, there will be another step where using IGY-CRCTL, the COBOL part will be converted into object code. Okay. Pre-compilation checks for syntax errors of both COBOL and syntax errors of DB2 part. So first of all, it will separate the COBOL and DB2 parts, and then COBOL part will be compiled internally, okay, using IGY-CRCTL. If there is any error in the program, okay, if there is any error, you have missed some alignment, area A, area B, or there is some period missing, some spelling missing. So any kind of syntax errors in the COBOL part, that will be, it will give error in that pre-compilation. It also checks for the syntax errors of DB2 part. Suppose you have used a used SQL code in your COBOL DB2 program, there is SQL code. The SQL code is wrong. That means, suppose you have mentioned a table name, but the table name is wrong. The table name is not there, or the query, it will not logically see the query. I mean, whether the query is correct or not, whether the query will work or not. It will just check for syntax errors. Like in SQL queries, we will write comma, or select name, comma, employee ID, comma. So those commas are missing or commas are present or not. This kind of syntax errors it will check. If there is any syntax error, it will get it in compilation. So compilation has three things to do. First of all, it will separate COBOL DB2 statements. And after separating COBOL DB2 statements, it using IGY CRCTL, it will convert the COBOL part into object code. Okay. And precompilation also check for syntax errors of DB2 part. There is one more. So precompilation will check for syntax errors of DB2 part, and if syntax there is syntax error, it will give error. It will give precompilation error. Or if there is no DB2 syntax error, then it will extract the DB2 part and put it into DBRM. So DBRM is something. It is called database request module. So in real time, you will have a DBRM library where with the program name, the same member will be created in DBRM. So it is very easy. If using, see, there is a program SAM PGM. Okay, inside that COBOL DB2 both statements are there. So when you precompile the program in load library, the object code will be generated with the same code, and in DBRM library with the same name, the DB2 statements will come. Okay, so there will be two output. In precompilation, there will be two output. In precompilation, two outputs. One is load module, that is object code. Object code of the program. It will come in load library with the same program name. And second one is DBRM. It will come in DBRM library with same program name. Okay, so it is very easy thing. You will precompile a program. The COBOL part and DB2 part will be separated. COBOL part will be internally compiled, and it will come in the load module, come into the load library. Same way how it is done in COBOL program. And the DB2 part will just separate the DB2 part, check for syntax error, and put it into DBRM. So there will be a DBRM in real time, and here also you have to create a DBRM. Automatically, it will create a member in the DBRM library with the same program. In the DBRM library, all the SQL DB2 statements will be there. In the load library, all the COBOL statements will be there. Third one is precompilation places a timestamp token in object code and DBRM. Since we are separating COBOL and DB2 statement here for compilation purpose, at last we have to combine both of them. At last, we have to combine both of them. At last, we have to combine both of them to run the program, right? Because the source code has both COBOL and DB2. In precompilation, we are separating, but while executing, we have to again combine so that it becomes the actual compiled code. That is why what the precompilation process will do is it will create a timestamp token. This is a logical thing. That means at what time this precompilation happened. Timestamp. That means year, month, date, hour, minute, second, millisecond. In that format, at what actual time the precompilation happened, that timestamp token will be generated, and it will be placed in both the object code and DBRM, so that while execution, the system gets to know if the timestamp token of object code and DBRM is matching or not, because there will be so many programs in your system, so many pre-compilation processes going on. If there is no timestamp token, there may be a mistake in executing, right? Because it's in the execution part, the object code and DBRM will be combined again. So how will the system validate that this object code is part of this, this object code and DBRM are part of the same program? It may combine some different object code, different DBRM also. That is why this timestamp token is generated. It will be placed in object code and DBRM. So at the time of execution, the system will match if the timestamp of object code and DBRM are matching or not. If it is matching, then it will be executed. If the system will understand that this object code and this DBRM are part of the same program. Okay. Now we have compiled our COBOL part successfully. Now this DB2 part we cannot compile. We have to bind the DB2 part. So for DB2 part, the executable format of DB2 part is called bind. Okay, we have to do bind. So the executable, to make the COBOL part executable, we have to compile it to make it an object code. To make the DB2 part executable, we have to bind it. So utility is ikjeft01. So using this utility, we can bind DBRM. Okay. So here few things are checked. I will say in shortcut. While discussing bind parameters, we will discuss in detail. So here the output of bind is plan or package. Okay. So when a DBRM is bound, after that a plan or package is created. Okay. Package is not executable, but plan is executable. So thing is, you try to understand here. So suppose there is a program which you want to bind here. After binding, in most of the projects, it directly creates plan. In each of the project, there will be a plan already created. In each project in real time, a plan will be already there. A plan is a product. Okay, it is a DB2 product. It will be already present in your project. While doing bind, you have to mention the plan name in the GCL. You have to mention the plan name in the GCL that please bind the DBRM into this plan, and this plan name should always be constant. You cannot give any random name because it is project specific. If your project name is ABC, plan name will be like this: ABC P01, something like that. This kind of 6-digit name will be there. For production, P, for UAT, maybe U. Okay. So why we are binding this DBRM into a plan? Because when the DBRM will be bound, this plan it will come to this plan, and this plan will be executable. We can execute this plan. Now while executing, and the timestamp token that was created would be passed to this plan. So whatever timestamp token the DBRM had, the same timestamp will come to this plan. Now while executing, we have to combine the object code and plan. System will try to match the timestamp. If it matches, then the program will execute. Otherwise, it will fail with -818 error. Okay, so I know you have many doubts. Okay, so suppose I have a COBOL program SAM PGM. Here I have COBOL plus DB2 both the statements. Suppose I am reading a mainframe file and I am loading the data in a table. Now, using general compilation process, we cannot do this. In COBOL program, in normal COBOL program, we can directly compile the program and we execute after that, because it is only COBOL statement. While after compiling only the source code will be converted into object code. But in case of COBOL DB2 program, we cannot simply compile, since along with COBOL code we have DB2 statements also. In that case, we have to pre-compile it. Pre-compile means before, right? So before compiling, what we are doing? So in pre-compile, first of all, we will separate the COBOL and DB2 statements. Using DS and HPC, we will separate the COBOL and DB2 statements. Okay. Then the COBOL part will be internally compiled and object code will be created. And the DB2 part will be checked in for any syntax error. And if there is no syntax error, it will be placed in DBRM. So in pre-compilation only, this entire thing will happen. Separation, then converting COBOL into object code, then checking syntax errors of DB2 part, and also placing that into DBRM. These four things will happen, and along with that, timestamp token will be generated that will be passed to both object code and DBRM. This entire thing will happen in pre-compilation. Now pre-compilation done, and COBOL part is also converted into object code. Now we have to take care of DB2 part. We have to make it into executable format. DB2 currently it is not in executable format. We have to make it. For DB2 statements, to make it executable, there is a process in real time that is called bind. So using the utility IKJEFT01, we have to take DBRM as input. Here output of bind is plan or package. Package is not executable, but plan is executable. Now I'll tell you what package is. So package is a product of mainframe again. In a project, most of the times we don't have package. We have directly plan. What is a package? Suppose you have a COBOL program and first of all in your project, so it depends on the configuration of the project. In whichever project you are working on, if they follow the process that after binding, first of all they bind it into a package, and then they convert the package into a plan. Then there will be 4 JCLs. One will be pre-compilation, one will be bind into package, third will be package to plan, fourth will be execution. But in most of the projects, they in the bind they directly convert the DB2 part into plan. But if there is any package, and I mean in some project they follow this process that they first bind it into a package, then there will be 4 JCLs total. But in most of the JCL projects, it's not there. So if there is any COBOL program, there is no subprogram inside it. So if you bind it into a package, only one package will be created. But if there is any COBOL program, and inside the COBOL program, it is calling some 3-4 other COBOL programs. So for each of the COBOL program, one each COBOL package will be created. That means if there are 5 programs, one main program, 4 sub programs, then total 5 packages will be created. So 5 packages you need to again convert, combine and convert into a plan. Then the plan will be executed. Okay. like people say now that this plan, we need to execute this plan, same. So this plan has to be executed. So first is pre-compilation GCL, then bind into package, then bind package into plan, then execution. Okay. So, but in some project, this bind into package is not there. Directly bind into plan. DB2 is directly bound into plan, and finally it is executed. So the timestamp token will be passed from the beginning, like it will be passed first to the object code, then to this DB2 part also, then from DBRM it will go to package, from package it will go to plan, and finally at the time of execution both will be checked. Both will be checked. It will combine the object code and plan, and while executing it will check if the timestamp is matching. Because if I am executing a COBOL program, I will also use the same plan. You will also use the same plan. Someone else, if he's submitting a COBOL program, executing a COBOL DB2 program, he will also use the same plan, because in a project, in your application, there will be only one plan. It is already created. While doing bind, you have to just give the name of the plan. It will automatically bind your code, and it will place it into that plan. It will automatically place the code into that plan. So that is why the system checks for timestamp, because since we are using the same plan, everyone, sometimes what may happen is if there is no timestamp, then my object code can be executed with some others DB2, some others plan, right? It is, if there is any mistake like that, my object code can may not be executed with my plan only, some others plan. So in that case, there will be a mistake. That is why the timestamp is checked, to make sure that this object code and this plan are part of the same program. So when it matches, it will be executed. Otherwise, it will fail with -808, 818 error. Any doubt? Have you understood? Or you have not understood at all?
Something.
Huh?
Sir, hello. So I
Yes.
understand, but not clearly, sir.
Okay. One second. So pre-compilation, you understood what is being done in pre-compilation. So this is
Yes,
just
sir.
the execution process of COBOL DB2 program. So take it like simple how a COBOL program is executed. There we have a COBOL program where first of all we need to convert the COBOL part into source code into object code. Why? Because the system cannot execute the source code directly. It has to be converted into object code, and the system can execute the object code. That is why first of all we combine and convert it. So the converting part is called precompilation. But here in case of COBOL DB2 statement, COBOL DB2 program, COBOL is a separate thing, DB2 is a separate thing. Since we are combining these two statements in a program, so why do you make source code into object code? To make it executable, make it in executable format. To making of COBOL part and DB2 part into executable is not the same. COBOL, the process of converting, making COBOL part in executable format is different. The way of converting DB2 part into executable format is different. That is why first of all we need to separate, because we need to apply different methods to convert the COBOL part into executable format, DB2 part into executable form. That is why first of all, it will separate the COBOL and DB2 part. Then in the same pre-compilation JCL, there will be after separating, there will be another step where the COBOL part will be converted into object code. Then in the same JCL, the DB2 part will be checked if there is any syntax error. If there is any syntax error, you will get pre-compilation error. And if there is no syntax error, it will be placed into DBRM. So in your pre-compilation JCL, you have to give source library, load library, DBRM library also. So DBRM and pre-compilation will also generate one timestamp token, which will be placed in object code and DBRM. Timestamp token as in, suppose you and your brother, you are small, you are going to a mela. So there is too much crowd, okay? And so that you don't get lost in the mela, your parents have given some headband, okay? Same kind of handband. So that whenever someone sees the handband in both of your hands, they can recognize that you are brothers. So that kind of a thing here. This timestamp token, why it is placed in object code and DBRM, to make sure, to tell the system that, okay, this object code and this DBRM are part of the same program, and you should validate by checking the timestamp. So timestamp is the time, exact time at which the pre-compilation is done. So when our DB2 statement is placed in DBRM, we have to bind it. The next process is bind, because we cannot compile DB2 DBRM like how we compile COBOL part. We have to bind it. To make the DB2 in executable format, the process is called bind. So the utility that is used is called IKJEFT01. So we have to take DBRM as input, here output of bind. So when we take DBRM as input, the executable format that is created is called plan. In some projects, they first of all, after binding, they create a package and then they convert the package into a plan. But in most of the projects, we directly convert it into a plan. That means internally it does, but in some projects they separately do into separate JCLs. But in most of the projects, there will be one JCL. Internally, it will bind into package and the package will be bound into plan. Now, this plan is the executable format of DB2. So the timestamp token will also be passed to this plan, same timestamp. Now, after that, in the execution process, since we have converted both the COBOL part and DB2 part into executable format, now we can execute the program. Now, how can we execute? First of all, we have to combine, right? We have to combine. Since we separated, now we have to combine. So to combine, in the execution JCL, you have to give IKJEFT01 as your utility, and you have to give both the load library where the object code is present and also the plan name as input, and you have to execute the program. The system will check whether the timestamps of both the load object code and plan is matching or not. If it is matching, then the system will execute the program successfully. Otherwise, the program will fail with -818 error. That timestamp token is not matching. So whenever you get -818 error, you have to resolution. What do you have to do? That means pre-compilation was successful only, but in bind there was a problem where the timestamp token is not passed correctly to the plan. So we have to rebind. That means the bind JSON we have to run again. So when there is an error in